Welcome to the Gus Alva Perspective, a videocast that elevates the notion associated with gratitude and abundance over the mindset of fear and scarcity. Being a board certified psychiatrist, I oftentimes hear certain quips from patients. And the theme that I'd like to touch on today is sort of an interesting one. A patient asked me, how is it best to deal with an irrational person? And I thought, well, that's very interesting. And I thought, it might not be a bad idea to address a video cast that helps revolve around the issue associated with what happens when the individual that we're trying to communicate with seems irrational in nature. Well, very first thing that we should keep in mind is staying calm. It's as easy as that, but staying calm and composed and responding with anger or frustration generally has a tendency to escalate a situation. So rather than allow that to happen, it's not a bad idea to simply take a step back, stay cool as a cucumber, and stay composed so as to de escalate the situation. Listening actively is not a bad idea because when we feel like somebody is stating irrational thoughts, it's a good idea to try to understand the underlying concerns or emotions that are driving that irrational behavior that we are interpreting. Actively listening can help diffuse tension and may uncover a solution or a compromise that may have been a big impasse between the communication that is being attempted between two people. Now, if we feel like we're speaking with somebody that's irrational, it's not a bad idea to validate the feelings that the other person has, even if you don't agree with their perspective. After all, this is the Gus Alva perspective. Even if you don't agree with that perspective, acknowledging the feeling that that other person is experiencing can help them feel heard as well as feel respected. And phrases that sound like, I understand you're upset, or I see why you might feel that way, can certainly be helpful in de escalating a situation that might otherwise start to brim and create additional problems and percolate into a bigger deal. It is important that we always set boundaries, and clearly communicating our boundaries and expectations for a conversation or interaction are really critical. We need to do this in a firm but respectful manner. We need to assert our own perspective if necessary, but doing so in a charitable manner. Above all, avoiding arguments is not a bad idea. When we engage in arguments or try to reason with an irrational person, this may only exacerbate the situation. Instead, it might not be a bad idea to focus on finding common ground or maybe just simply redirecting the conversation to a more productive ground. Dependent on the situation, whether I'm dealing with parents that have problems with a petulant child or the flip side of that, caregivers of somebody who's now experiencing serious cognitive problems and they become irrational and start arguing by simply redirecting the situation, that oftentimes helps buffer, again, the feelings that start emanating from people. It's not a bad idea to offer solutions also, if possible. Proposing practical solutions or alternatives to address concerns that are being voiced is not a bad thing. This demonstrates our willingness to find a resolution and might help shift the focus from emotions to problem solving. And ultimately, that'll actually help de escalate any situation. Above all, though, it's not a bad idea to know when to disengage. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, it may not be possible to reason with an irrational person. In such cases, it's okay to disengage from the interaction to protect your own well being. Now, when you think about this, it's not a bad idea to seek support if it's needed. If you're dealing with the irrational person and the situation's becoming too overwhelming or it's escalating, it's not a bad idea to seek support from a trusted friend or a family member or a colleague. And remember that there's also professional help that might be beneficial in some cases. Sometimes people feel a sense that when they seek out a third party to help alleviate a situation that's now brewing out of control, that might actually help. It's not always the case, and so we need to be prudent with that. I say that because having been involved with several situations where people thought that maybe bringing in a third party to help with de escalating a situation actually made it even worse when there was a teaming up of two people and there was a triangulated situation where now the other person felt attacked. The importance, however, of dealing with this particular topic, how to deal with somebody that seems irrational, is that it recalls that our mindset of gratitude and abundance should remind us that overall patience, empathy, and clear communication are key and critical when dealing with an irrational person. While it might be challenging, approaching the situation with a level head and a willingness to find common ground can often lead to a more positive outcome. I thank you for joining us on the Gus Alva Perspective, dealing with this particular theme of dealing with an irrational person, a situation that we may have all encountered at one point or another, or may in the near future, and at least have the foundation from a psychiatric point of view of how to placate the situation and lessen the negative impact that this might bring about. Thank you all and have a phenomenal rest.